All right. What's happening? Hold on one second. Okay. I was listening to little David Holmes there from the Let's Get Killed record. I interviewed David Holmes one time. Very interesting character. Very interesting character. Rodney Yates. That's the song, isn't it? Isn't it Rodney Yates? Let me see. Let me see what we got here. Oh, I got to find the track list for Let's Get Killed. Hold on. Maybe I'll play this track. Welcome to Sunday Night AstroLive. It's me, Robert Phoenix. And broadcasting to you live from the Hill Country. We're going to get into some astrology today. Thanks for being here. Let me see. What do we have here? I got to find this one track and maybe I can cue it up. Let's see. Pretty sugar. Let's see. Which one is it? It's Rodney Yates. Well, that's his name. Let me see. All right, Gritty Shaker. That's the name of the track. Let me find a little Gritty Shaker and let's get this thing going. And I'll tell you a little story behind Gritty Shaker. Let's see. I'll find a good one here. That's not it. No. What the hell is that track? I thought it was Gritty Shaker. Yeah. It is Gritty Shaker. Okay. So it is Gritty Shaker. Now, there is a couple of different versions of Gritty Shaker with David Holmes because I think that they wanted to edit Rodney Yates out of the track. And I'll tell you why in a second. You find the right mix. So this is interesting. Welcome to Sunday Night AstroLive, by the way. I'm trying to find this track by David Holmes because there's a guy by the name of Rodney Yates who was this astrologer in New York City, and he was at a park. He used to hang out in New York City at like a park inside the city, and he would walk around with an ephemeris, and he'd walk up to you and want to know if you want a reading. And so he'd open up the ephemeris and he'd look at the ephemeris and say what sign you are, you know, where your Neptune is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That was Rodney Yates. Anyway, he did the song called Gritty Shaker, and Rodney Yates did this spoken word intro because David Holmes walked around New York City one day high in acid, and he was recording people. And he took those recordings of people that he met in New York City, and then he put them as intros, or he would put them in samples on this record called Let's Get Killed. Now, he redid Gritty Shaker, and he redid it for Ocean's 11 because he did the soundtrack for that. But he took Rodney Yates out of the song for Ocean's 11. And the reason why is because Rodney Yates is a pain in the ass. Because when I met him, I said, "You're the guy that was on that David Holmes track," right? He looked at me, and he actually wore a shirt, a purple T-shirt that said Rodney Yates Astrologer or Park Astrologer or something like that. Like that was his billboard. And he looked at me. He was like, "Well, how did you know? How did you figure this out?" I said, "Well, how did you do? Did you make any money off that?" And he said, "Yeah, he gave me $10,000. I'm like, "Wow, really? He gave you $10,000? And then he said that he wanted to sue him for more. I'm like, "Dude, you're lucky you got anything. You're lucky you got anything." So they redid the track for Ocean's 7 or Ocean's 11 or whatever it is, the remake. And they just edited him right out of the track. And probably a good idea. It's actually a really good piece of music. I should say hello to everybody. What's happening? What's happening, everyone? Getting a little bit of a late start tonight. I've been wrapping up some business here because we had the election yesterday. How was my meeting on Friday? We'll go back. I'll go back in time. We'll go back. We'll rewind the clock and we'll go back in time to my meeting on Friday. Did I win the election? Well, that's a good question. What do you think? What do your spidey senses say? If I won the election or not? What do you think? It's a good question. Let's go back to Friday. Friday was a good day. I got up early and I drove down to Kerrville, which is where we have our yearly event. And I went to the YO Hotel. And the YO is the sort of companion hotel for the Inn of the Hills. And that's where they were having a jumpstart for this local candidate or local candidates that were running for office here in the Hill Country, but primarily for this one young guy. When I say young, I mean young. He's 19 years old. So he's a Zoomer, Gen Z, running for city council in Kerrville, 19 years old. So it was him and a sort of Beto-fueled Democrat, progressive woman. Very, very different in terms of their demographic. Young, male, Latino, probably around late 40 something, early 50 something, progressive, Beto-fueled woman. One seat, two people. So somebody who I got to know pretty well decided they were going to put that event together. And they brought Lieutenant Colonel Alan West in. And I can bring an astrological component to all this, which I think is only appropriate since this is an astrology show. And people tune in to learn about astrology. So number one, we have, again, this groundswell of roots people coming together. They're like iron filings being drawn together by a magnet, and the magnet is change. And the magnet is this dynamic between Saturn and Jupiter. And really it fits in a lot of ways, because if you look at a magnet, it's got these polarities. And Saturn, of course, is going to want to make things smaller, and Jupiter is going to want to make things bigger. And so Jupiter's about ready to go into Pisces here. So, but only for a brief period of time. For now, even though they're fairly far apart, they're still in the sign of Aquarius. So we have this force that is contracting and another force that's expanding. And somewhere in the middle is this very interesting field that's generating this experience. And it's within the polarity, right? We got going this way and coming this way, going this way and coming this way, going this way and coming this way. And somewhere in the center here is this very interesting kind of experience taking place. So that room that was set aside for this meeting, all of a sudden they had to open the doors, because it was a partitioned space, and it's like, we've got too many people, so they brought more people in, and they brought more chairs in, and all of a sudden now this thing is like, wow, this is gone from being a modest event to, hey, we've got to find more space. So this is where we are right now. This is where we are. This is where people are responding to the call. And the call is this organizing principle, which is really a self-organizing principle. It's not an organizing. I mean, there are loose affiliations there. Like, number one, a lot of these people are going to be Republicans or conservatives or patriots or constitutionalists or Christians, and kind of a melding of all of those things to one degree or another. But that's what brought them all together, because they know that they are on the front lines of their lives in a lot of ways. So Lieutenant Colonel Alan West was there. This guy, he was I'll show you who he is. If you don't know who he is, he was actually really impressive. And I'm not somebody who's really taken in by politicians. I wouldn't really call him a politician per se. So let me show you Alan Bernard West, an American politician and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel. A member of the Republican Party, West represented Florida's 22nd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives from 2011 to 2013. And he has served as the chair of the Republican Party since 2020. Let me see if we can find a good sort of rendition of Alan West here. There we go. And I promise I'll bring this back to astrology, because, of course, that's what the show is about. So here's Alan West right here. Very interesting guy. And I'm sure I haven't gone through all of his Wikipedia page, but I guess he was tortured in Iraq, and he was in Florida for those 2 years, and then they redistricted him, and now he's the head of the Republican Party in Texas. And this guy was, he was a Democrat. Let's see, he went up against Ron Klain, 2008. Okay. He lost to Ron Klain. And Ron Klain is one of the people that is a major player right now in the Biden administration behind the scenes. And then he beat him in 2010. And then he lost narrowly here in 2012. So he was there for 2 years, and they decided to, I think he said that they redistricted, and they got him. They got him out. So he's an Aquarian. He is an Aquarian. Where is he? So I know his chart pretty well. February 7th, 1961. So he was there, and he introduced this kid, Roman Garcia, 19 years old, Gen Z, very impressive. I'm telling you, man, there's some of these Gen Z kids, they are, when you find a good Gen Z kid, they are really impressive. I mean, 19, I was a mess at 19. I was a mess at 19. I was getting high every day before I went to class in junior college. I mean, I had really, really bad habits. I had a lot of fun, but I had really, really bad habits. I'm going to blame it on Neptune transiting my first house in Sagittarius. I'm going to blame it on that Neptune. Anyway, this kid was 19 years old and just impressive. So Alan West was great because, number one, you can tell he's an iconoclast. He's got that kind of Aquarian iconoclastic vibe. He's black. He went to a Catholic school, growing up in Georgia. It's like, hey, you really don't do that. So he's black. He went to a Catholic school in Georgia. And he's the guy that is now the head of the Republican Party. And he's been talking about secession for Texas. Now, he didn't really talk about that on Friday, but he knows the score. Like, there was this one person who was saying, well, like, what can we do? What can we do? I talked to, Chip Roy's office or Cornyn. I think it was Chip Roy. Like, what can we do? What can we do? We're having a real hard time with the borders and immigration. What can we do? What can we do? And this woman just said, vote. And he said, well, no, there's more than you could follow. You guys could form little groups. There you go. There's your Aquarian kind of sentiment, right? Brought to you by an Aquarian. You can form study groups. And then he said, how many of you have read Rules for Radicals? Of course, I raised my hand. Saul Alinsky, another Aquarian. And he said, you got to read Rules for Radicals. You got to know their playbook. Then he said, how many of you know what a progressive tax is? How many of you know where the idea of the progressive tax came from? So it came from Das Kapital by Karl Marx. How many of you have read Das Kapital? So he was getting people to think along these lines. Number one, you got to be informed. You have to be informed. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know the rules of engagement. You have to know how you're going to deal with some of these people. And then he said, what happens if you run into somebody who is Black Lives Matter? And they said, all lives matter. He said, no, that's the wrong answer. He said, the right answer is which Black lives? Is it the ones that get murdered by the dozens every weekend in Chicago and Baltimore and Detroit? Or is it the Black babies that are murdered at Planned Parenthood facilities in the inner cities? Do those Black lives matter? Which ones take more priority and precedence? See, he was getting people to think in an alternative way, which is an Aquarian kind of way. And he was demonstrating this Aquarian ability to get people to think differently. And I thought it was great. So I got up and I was introduced by the people that put this event together, and I gave a little speech, and I got a few rounds of applause. It was cool. And then Tom Marshall, who's was running for city council here. They introduced him as well, and they gave him some applause. And then this kid, Roman Garcia, again, Gen Z, got up there and gave a very, very impressive speech. And Alan West talked about, he had thought about this, and he talked about how in Sparta, when a young man is taken from his home, he's like 6 years old. I mean, that was the idea. Oh, look who's here. The executive producer's here. So they take them from their mother at 6 years of age. And then at 18, I think it's 16, 10 years worth of training. Their mother presents them with their shield in Sparta. That was the ritual. So Roman's mother was there, and and I don't think she knew this was going to happen. So he brought her up on to the, it wasn't a stage, in front of the audience. He basically had his mother symbolically present him with the shield. It wasn't a real shield, right? But it was kind of this metaphoric shield, or symbolic metaphoric shield. And then that's when he endorsed him to run for city council. And guess what? The kid won. The kid won. He's the youngest city council person in Kerrville. He may be one of the youngest in the state of Texas. You got to be at least 18. And this kid is 19 and change. So if he's not the youngest, he's probably one of the 3 youngest to ever serve as a city council member. He won 57% of the vote. They got together, and guess what? They flipped it. They flipped it. And this kid could be a star, whatever he does in life. Whether he decides to stay in government, serve wherever he goes. I'm telling you right now, this kid's going to be a star. Just the presence of mind and the composure, the articulation was brilliant. This is somebody who's not gone to college, by the way, 19 years old. Keep that in mind. 19 years old. So we had our election yesterday. And so I was in line waiting to meet Alan West. And there were these 2 guys waiting in line. They were I think around my age, maybe a little younger. And they were cool guys. And one of them was wearing a black leather jacket. He had kind of long hair. He had glasses, and he was a pretty nice guy. And he says to me, he says, "Hey man, this God stuff is real. It's real." I'm like, "Yeah, I am. I'm down with that." And he said, "Do you know where you're going to be in 1,000 years?" And I'm thinking, okay, I know the answer to that. In heaven with my Father. I'm like, okay, where do I go with this? I'm thinking, I think probably the right answer is where you're thinking you're going to be in 1,000 years. And he laughed. And then we talked a little bit, and he says, "You mind if I pray over you?" I'm like, "Sure, I don't have a problem with that." So he put his hand on my heart, and he did a really, rock solid prayer. I got to tell you, and his buddy was right there. So I was part of the prayer line. It was just all very spontaneous, And I'm like, this is cool. I liked it. It was, and by the way, I was accused of being a Satanist in this election. And if I was a Satanist, I wouldn't have allowed that to happen now, would I? I said, it's really okay. You don't have to pray over me. You don't have to do that. But I was okay with it. And then he said, this God stuff is real. He said, have you been up to the cross? Have you been up to the cross? And I'm telling you, miracles happen up there. Miracles happen there. He said, we went up there, and we did some praying, we did some anointing. And next thing you know, there's a guy writing him a check for $500,000, meaning his buddy, $500,000 for some land. Guess what? We're getting it. And I said, I wanted the confirmation. I wanted to have one hawk as a confirmation. We got 6 hawks. I'm like, I don't know what's going on with you guys, but I like the 6 hawk thing. I like the hawk confirmation thing. I'm into that. So then I got up and had a little photo op with Alan West. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling pretty good about this election thing. Pretty good. So I get up the next morning, and it is pouring rain. It is like Noah-like conditions. Pouring rain. And the idea is to be out where they're actually doing the polling place. And you can be out there. It's called electioneering. You can hold up signs and hand out pamphlets, but you have to be a certain number of feet away from the actual place itself, which we were. And so these cars were coming in, and I was out there the 7 to 7, and I was probably out there, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 hours yesterday, waving, shaking hands, passing out cards. And there were people who were like really cool with me, who were driving up and everything. And there was this one older couple who live around the corner from my house. And I did a little block walking, and I went to their house. And they were Democrats. And so I talked to the guy, the older guy. He's like an older Hispanic guy. And he said to me when I was at his house, he said, "I cannot speak for my wife, but you will get my vote." And sure enough, they rolled in, and there he was. And he said, "I already voted for you. I do not know about my wife, but I already voted for you." I'm like, I thanked him, and that was really cool. And this one woman drove by. I didn't know who she was. My crew didn't know who she was. And she said, "Oh, yeah, you're on my list." I don't know. I think it was a good list, hopefully. Anyway, I felt, it's hard to really tell with these things. But based on the number of people that came through and kind of that feedback from yesterday, I felt pretty good. Like, you know what? I might have a puncher's chance with this. That said, we were driving in, and I remember seeing these two signs together on a lawn. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Why are these two signs together? And I looked at it and I said to myself, I think these people are going to win. And one of the signs was the quote unquote liberal candidate here. And the other is this guy who claims to be a conservative and a constitutionalist, but he's anything but. And neither of them are impressive at all. They're just not impressive. They're not impressive. Because I was on these forums with them, and everybody was just saying, my God, they have nothing to say. They have no, they have no charisma. They have no gravitas. Just, they're nothing. Right. But I said to myself, you know what? She's a liberal and he's liberal friendly. And I looked at all the other candidates. There was like 4 other candidates who were kind of devouring each other's votes. And I said to a couple of people yesterday, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win. So later that night, last night, we're sitting around till about, I think around 11 o'clock at night, we found out what the election results were. And they did indeed win. I was correct. I was right. They won. So I did not win. However, that said, there's a reason why I felt good about the amount of people that were voting for me, because I saw the list, the breakout list for Saturday, and I was right in there with a group so there's a top guy, and then there's another guy, and then there was a group of 3 of us. And we were all kind of grouped together, including the woman who won. She got maybe 3 or 4 more votes than I did yesterday. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Now, the difference is that she got a bunch of mail-in votes, a ton of mail-in votes. I got 5, which I'm surprised. 5 people actually mailed in a vote for me. I was like, wow. And then she had more early votes than I did. I didn't have that many, but I had a really high number of votes yesterday. So in terms of total votes, I actually finished last. I have no problem saying that. But if you look at the breakout where I theoretically lost the election or was not like competitive, it was the mail-in votes and the early voting. Saturday, I was in the mix. I was definitely in the mix. And so it was, it was a good feeling. And there were people that I didn't know that voted for me. I live in this town. I've only been here 3 years. Nobody really knows me. So to get, the amount of votes that I did, I think it was a bit of a victory. And uh, I think that's it. I think I'm finished with elections, and I'm finished with trying to participate at that level. Pretty much done with it. And mostly because, and by the way, the election was clean. It was a clean election. There was no hanky panky. We had poll watchers on the inside counting the votes. There was no hanky panky. In fact, there were some mail in ballots that they disqualified because they didn't look right. Like the person, there was just some incongruities with the mail in ballots. So some of those were disqualified. So I'm not going to blame the system at all. But I just think the dynamics here are not, they're just not ready for people to have a real grassroots kind of change. They're still under the money trance, and there's still a high kind of level of real organized, quote unquote, democratic liberal organization here, and they were more organized. Meanwhile, you have, the Tea Party and the Republican Party, and they're at each other's throats, which you're not going to win. Just divide and conquer. Hello, Gemini, right? True Node and Gemini. So even one of the incumbents didn't win, and it's just the way it is. So there you go. There's the answer to the question. And yeah, it would have been interesting to be in the octagon with these people. I'd be okay with it, but I'm okay with it not happening either. I just get a feeling like it's not going to go well. It's just not going to go well for them. And I have some other things I'm going to do just in terms of trying to bring some awareness to certain things here. I'm not going to talk about it, but I have some other things I'm working on. In the meantime, it's about astrology, and welcome to Sunday Night AstroLive. I am Robert Phoenix. I'm your host, your guide, your captain. Look who's here. Look who's here. It's the Astro Cat. Jasper, the astrological cat. Jasper, what do you have to say to people? Do you have any words of wisdom for your fans out there? Do you have any words of wisdom? I don't know if he does. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Anyway, it's good to be here. How is everybody? We're going to be talking astrology. Now, I have to tell you right now, I don't have a lot prepared for tonight because, well, yesterday I spent all day dealing with election stuff. And today I was kind of in, sort of a reconsolidation or consolidation phase. And I hung out with some people from the group that was, kind of behind me and this other candidate. So, we were breaking down what happened, and we were breaking down sort of, what can or might happen. And these people are very smart people. They're not unaware. They're really aware, and they're trying to, wrap their heads around how we can deal with our local situation. And as I mentioned, Kerrville, south of me, they're aligned. Those people are aligned. And that is not a tourist town. People don't go to Kerrville to hang out. People go to Kerrville to get to Fredericksburg. Okay. That's what happens with Kerrville. People go to Kerrville to kick drugs and alcohol. It is like a major rehab center. That's where Britney Spears theoretically either dried out or got deprogrammed. So they're in a very different place than this place. And this place is on the drip line of the tourist economy. And so, yeah, whole different scene. Whole different scene. But what I will say again, and I'm just trying to trying to get you guys to understand this, is this Aquarian kind of experience of very disparate people sort of coming together because of the contraction of our freedoms, of our ability to either speak freely, assemble freely, move freely, have free medical choices. I mean, these are all the things now that are contracting vis-a-vis Saturn in Aquarius. So again, with Jupiter Aquarius, what are we doing? We're expanding. We want to push the envelope out a bit, and that's what's taking place. And it's been, again, kind of an amazing experience. Very disparate, very, very disparate. And it's so disparate that even, the guy that that thought I was a practitioner of the dark arts, he actually called me today to congratulate me on a campaign that was well run, and that he said he respected my commitment to campaign. So, here's a guy whose wife was calling me a Satanist on Facebook, and he had the, I don't know, character, or I don't know how you want to call it, to at least tip his cap to me. And he didn't win either. He lost by 20 votes. And, it wouldn't have been the worst thing if he'd gotten in. He would have been better than who they have. This is going to head for disaster. That's my sense. That's just my sense. And it may not be done. It may not be anything that's going to be caused by the participation of the city council. I just get it. It's like, you guys had a chance. You had a chance with the fluoride stuff. You kicked it to the curb. You had a chance to elect some new people that would have brought a new vision and a new kind of understanding to this place. You kicked it to the curb. You can only do those things so many times. And take me out of the equation. I'm not personalizing this. You can only do those things so many times. It's sort of like, the Lord works in mysterious ways. It's like, here you go. Here's an opportunity. Take advantage of the opportunity. You get to do something. No, sorry, we're not going to do that. We're gonna shut it down, and we're gonna run, SOS, same old shit. And at some point, the universe will say, okay, well, you had your chance. You had your chance. Guess what? Now you get to deal. Now you get to deal with the crisis or catastrophe or the situation that you have. So, wish them all the best. All right. I wanted to get into some stuff today about what's happening in terms of the world and the synthesis of houses, in what I call the consolidation of the fourth quadrant, because that's what's happening. And I'm gonna get into that and break that down and show you how and why. Well, the why I think you probably know, but how it's happening. And who's this? Oh, hold on one second. Hey, what's up? What's up? Yep. Yep. Right. Yep. Yep. I agree. In fact, I'm doing my show right now. I was just talking about that. I was just talking about it. So, let's talk later. And but I wanted to pick up the call, and I agree with you, and I think that there are big picture items that are much more important. Yep. Okay. Goodbye. See, that's how this thing works. That's how it works. That's how it works. This is where we are right now. I'm talking about it. I get a call from somebody who said basically the same thing, because they're saying, hey, we're dealing with all this minutia stuff and all these niggly things, and there's the big picture stuff could happen any moment now. And absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I was just saying, hey, look, you guys had an opportunity to address change and bring people in that could be, change agents. Not going to do it. Not, and it's gonna catch up. It's going to catch up. And at that point, you just have to get out of the way and let the boulder run down the hill. You just got to get out of the way, let it run down the hill. There's nothing you can do to stop the boulder. And that's, kind of what that person was saying to me on the phone in real time, just like that. So this is how things are working now. I'm telling you that the telepathic connections too are something else. There's like, if you pay attention now, especially if you're weaning yourself away from other forms of media, like I don't watch TV anymore. I limit what I watch online. Again, this is a very Saturn. Let's bring it back to astrology. Saturn Aquarius. We're going to limit the influence of mass media or even alternative media in our lives. Conversely, with Jupiter, we're going to expand the potential for communication. And it doesn't always have to do with this, right? It has to do with multiple levels of communication. So for instance, I think it was Thursday. I don't want to get into the sequence of events, but something went off in my head. Because, well, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I hear a lot of sirens, emergencies. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if some of these emergencies are COVID related. If that's true, would we be able to figure that out and prove that? So then I decided to go to the obituaries in the paper to see who passed away, see if there was any lives that were kind of like, oh, and there were. I just filed it away, but it was going on in my head, right? It was in my head. Because if you could prove that people in your area have had the second shot and then quickly something happened to them, you've got some very interesting information on your hands. If you live in a small town, you might be able to figure that out. And there are some people that met that criteria. So the wheels were spinning in my head. And then I said to myself, I got to call so-and-so. And I walked into my room and I grabbed my phone, and then so-and-so had texted me, call me when you get this message. It was right there. Oh, right there. It's like, okay, we're in sync. We're in sync here. Happened earlier in the week. Working with a young woman in California. She's one of my coaching clients. I had given her we had a couple of intense sessions. And I said, maybe you want to let this kind of simmer. And when you're ready, let's get back together again. And she had asked me if her partner could be a part of the session. I said, sure, no problem. So I guess it was Wednesday. I'm like, okay, it's time for me to reach out to her. I went to the phone, called her, and she said, I was just going to connect with you this afternoon. So there it is. Like we're evolving into a different level of communication, a different level of communication. And that's beginning to emerge. Pay attention to these things. They're very important. Emily Moore gets into a lot of this stuff. But pay attention to these networks, these inner networks that are connecting. We're going to need them. We're really going to need them. Because at some point, this could go away very easily. And we're going to need to be able to communicate the way that we normally can communicate, which is, we don't need a cell phone, or we don't, if we did not have these things, we could have evolved along a different line, and we would have been probably way ahead of the game. And I'm not saying that both things can't be equally true. They could be. We have an overdependence on technology so much now that they want to replace our own immune systems with an artificial immune system. Talk about an overdependence of technology. So we're going to get into the consolidation of the fourth quadrant tonight. And we're still going to be exploring the emerging Aquarian theme. There's Alan West, Mr. Aquarius, February 7th. The head of this group. And what are they? They're a group of, a lot of ways they're misfits, right? These people are misfits. This is, those people are, they're the resistance. They're the true rebels. They're the true soul rebels. If you haven't noticed it, the so-called left and the progressives, they become the status quo, and they reach the status quo status quo level when Obama became president. That was it. That was the crowning achievement of the Weather Underground. They managed to get one of their own into the White House, and not just as the wife of a president, all Hillary Clinton. So the real rebels, the real revolutionaries, the real radicals are the people that were, in that hotel ballroom on Friday morning with a Black Catholic Aquarian sort of, leading the charge, so to speak. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that and some other things tonight. So here we go. Let's do a little invocation, and we'll get into the actual, aspects and transits of tonight's show. All right, here we go. Dear blessed Holy Mother, Father God, of the great central sun, within the universe light, which is the light of Yeshua Sananda Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information, wisdom, and truth come through this channel at this time. And in so doing, we affirm and decree the qualities of steadfastness and clarity, of vision, of balance, of faith, of courage and strength and flexibility, of perception and discernment, clarity, humor, timing, discernment, compassion, empathy, and above all, love. We ask that any karmic residue be cleansed, purified, clarified, and removed from this stream. Okay, why don't we take a look at where everything is with the stars. Let us look at the stars, shall we, mon amour? Okay, here we go. Oh, look. Look at that. Look at that. It's an Aquarian moon. How about that? An Aquarian moon. Let me get in here and just kind of tweak the settings just a little bit. Okay, where are we? Oh, by the way, do you guys follow the NFL draft at all? Probably not. The first player born in the new millennium was drafted on Saturday. Actually, no, it was Thursday. Drafted on Thursday. It was Trey Lance. Trey Lance was born May 9th, 2000. The guy's got a crazy, crazy stellium chart of Taurus. Crazy. He's got more Taurus in his chart than anybody I've ever seen. It's right. It's that period of May where they have that just massive stellium of Taurus in 2000. At the beginning of the month, even Mars was in Taurus. His Mars is in Gemini. Anyway, first player of the new millennium drafted in the NFL. I mean, sports aside, like that's the first guy. Whole new era. And he seems like a cool young dude. All right, where are we? We're good. Okay. Here we go. Speaking of Taurus, we got a lot of it in the house. And we got the chart of the moment. Yes, a little Scorpio rising. The intensity is the Scorpio rising. All right. Here we go. This is where we are now. Right here, there's the moon in Aquarius. What are we talking about? We're talking about Aquarius, the time that we're in, and Jupiter getting ready to transition here pretty quickly into Pisces. It'll be there for 2 degrees. So it's going to be an interesting sort of study, right? From kind of a mundane perspective. Like, how will we be able to discern and view the influence of Jupiter in Pisces for a brief period of time? Like, will we be able to track it? And if so, how will we be able to track it? Right now, Jupiter is in a wide square with Mercury. Now, guess what's going to happen? We've got Mercury at 28 degrees. So in 2 days, 3 days, we'll call it 3 days and change, Mercury will be at 0 Gemini. And we're going to have Jupiter in 3 days right there at 29 Pisces. Now, it won't be a total square job because Mercury would have to be over here. Actually, let me hold on a second. That's not true. My bad. I'm thinking ahead. Mercury will be in it. Mercury will be still in that square. It'll still be in that square, but it won't. Jupiter won't be completely in Pisces. That said, we got a Mercury retrograde coming up, and they're going to collide. So let's look at that. Okay, so we have Jupiter goes into Pisces on the 14th, 0 Pisces, and then Mercury retrogrades, but it only goes back to, let's see. Yeah, it only goes back to like 16. And Jupiter gets to 2. So we won't really get into that Pisces, Gemini mutable square, but we'll still have it. I mean, we'll still have the square. Let's see. So the closest we're going to get really is, let's see, right about now. I mean, this is, at that 29th degree, the anaretic degree of Aquarius, we're looking at right around Tuesday. So that's going to be Thursday. It's going to be the 6th. Let's see. Thursday's the 3rd. The 3rd, I'm sorry. 6 degrees is on Saturday. So to me, this is going to be probably the closest that we're going to have with that square. 3 degrees is going to be on Wednesday, 28 Jupiter, 1 Mercury, and then 29 Jupiter, and then 3 Gemini on. So the 5th and the 6th of this week is where we get into that Mercury Jupiter square. But it's odd because you're dealing with air. It's very unusual when you have I wouldn't say it's uncommon because we see these things by degree, but we'll have that Jupiter Mercury square going on in the same element. That's going to be really weird. I have to say, it's going to be really weird. Now, Venus, on the other hand, and Jupiter will be in a more classic mutable square, and that'll be on the 14th, Friday the 14th, with Jupiter at 0 Pisces and Venus at 6 Gemini. That's when they're both in mutability, and that 29th degree of Jupiter, that anaretic degree, again will still be in square with Venus, and it's going to be in square with the moon as well. So we're just coming off of a new moon. So this week, really starting from like Wednesday and going through the 13th and the 14th of next week, those aspects are going to be interesting. Very interesting. The thing with Pisces is, in a lot of ways, really the driver of this quote unquote pandemic. I mean, if you think about Pisces and you think about the 12th house, it's laboratories. And it's an extension in a lot of ways of the 11th house. The 11th house being science and Aquarius. And hey, let's create something freaky and new, and let's become the creators of the world. And but we got to go do it somewhere. So let's go do it in the 12th house in a level 4 lab somewhere where nobody goes. So the pandemic itself has 12th house roots. Who goes to a level 4 lab? I don't, unless you're some kind of an MK Ultra kid. I don't have that claim to fame. Although sometimes I wish I did. Because there was a period there where if you were a super soldier, or you had MK Ultra trauma abuse, boy, you got lots of views, lots of hits. And that was a way to kind of secure 15 minutes. I guess the other one would be like what, an abductee, alien abductee. Anyway, so everything comes out of the 12th house with this quote unquote pandemic. That's where it starts. The opposite of the 12th house is the 6th house, and that's where theoretically, you get together and you figure the health thing out with the 6th house. What? Can't see chart. Well, you're not supposed to see the chart. I'm not showing you a chart right now for a reason. The chart is just an ephemeris. That's all. I'm not showing you a chart. You have to put it together in your head. I'll show you. I'll just show you what I'm riffing off of here so you guys can see it. This is what I'm looking at. It's called an ephemeris right there. You guys know that. And this is what I was referring to right here, right here. We get into Jupiter, Aquarius, and then we get into that square right there with Mercury. And then we've got, this is all what this week, this is going to be interesting because we also have the moon in Pisces. Yeah, to me, there's, I mean, these aspects just bleed propaganda. They bleed propaganda. You get Gemini, the messenger, Mercury and Gemini, trickster. You get Jupiter, these final degrees of Aquarius before it goes into Pisces. The energy's kind of all over the place. I feel like, you know, there's a lot of, even though I've been touting the self-organizing principles of Jupiter and Aquarius, remember, you get into those final degrees, which is kind of where we are, the energy's like crazy. And if you try to create like if you try to create propaganda, I think during these final degrees of Jupiter Aquarius, it can go sideways. It can go many different directions because it's really hard to control. And especially if you've got a square with Mercury going on. So it feels to me like we're in a place now that there is, I wouldn't call it an open space, but it's sort of like, how would I describe it? Okay. I'm not sure if this is the best example, but I'll try to use it. I remember one time, my kid and I we were at an amusement park, Santa Cruz, and I may get demerits for this as being a dad, but we were at an amusement park in Santa Cruz, and you know, you play the arcade games and they spit out tickets, and then you take the tickets to the front, you redeem them, you spend a shitload of money to get some tickets and get a cheap little, you know, toy from China. So one time we were there and one of these machines, well, it was kind of broken. And he figured out he was just pulling tickets out of it. I'm like, holy shit, look at that. He's, you know, he's got Jupiter in the second house. So he's always been lucky in this way. So all these tickets are coming out. I had to ask myself, what should I do here? Should I make an example of this and say, hey, we can't do that. We can't do that. That's not fair. I have to say I wasn't that guy. I wasn't that guy. I was like, oh, look at that. I let him take a bunch of tickets. I'm sorry. Like, they make money hand over fist. They rip people off all the time. I know it's a justification, but I got the tickets and I stopped at a certain point. It wasn't like I was gouging the system. Okay. And we took him up and he got a little toy, whatever. I also, by the way, paid money for a lot of other arcade games that day and got some tickets. Santa Cruz is not going out of business, but that's kind of what it's like. Like I think we're at a point where here, like the ticket machine's kind of broken, but we have these squares going on. And it almost feels like you can kind of enter into something. Like you can kind of enter into the quote unquote matrix in a different kind of way with these squares. Like reality becomes very plastic with all this mutability going on. And especially, you know, here at the 29th degree. So look around, like look at what the messaging is. I mean, even with something like, you know, quote unquote Biden and whatever, whoever that is, and whatever's going on in the White House, whatever that is at this point, nobody really knows. And I'll tell you how nobody really knows. I was talking with somebody who knows Chip Roy. Chip is the representative from Texas in the White House. And they asked him, so what's going on there? Who's running the show? And he didn't say much. He didn't say much, and the vibe that I got that person was conveying was he was not real hopeful. Like he did not have any confidence that whatever was going on, that they knew where it was going, because they don't. They don't. That said, with all this strange mutability coming in, especially here, especially on the 13th and the 14th, we get the Gemini moon. We've got Mercury in Gemini. You know, Venus kicks in. Mercury, Gemini. There's Venus. We get Jupiter. Right. It's not close to Neptune, but Neptune's also going to be in Pisces. And oh yeah, Neptune's going to be squaring Mercury, and Neptune's going to be squaring Venus. So we've got a lot of mutability going on this month. A lot of changeability. So there's not a lot of Earth again too. We have Uranus, which is crazy Earth. You know, we're just coming out of, you know, theoretically, it's a more stable period with Venus and Taurus. I mean, we're going to have that until the 9th. And then Mercury, you know, moves into Gemini on the 5th. So after that, we'll have the Sun and we'll have Uranus, and Pluto. That's not too bad, although outer planets, right? But this area right here, this is the freaky zone right here. This is the freaky zone. We have right there, bang, here and here, and probably here, right here. I would say the 30th and the 31st, right there. Let's just go with the 31st. Walt Whitman's birthday. Freaky zone. We've got Venus at 26 Gemini. Mercury just goes retrograde at 24. We have Neptune at 23, squaring Venus, squaring Mercury. We've got Jupiter at 1 Pisces, squaring the Sun in Gemini. We've got a mutability crisis at the end of the month. And I think May is going to be nuts. I think May is going to be good luck trying to figure out what the storyline is in May. It's going to be elusive. That said, because there's so much flux and mutability, quoting David Sylvian, so much flux and mutability that I think you'll be able to enter into like the Matrix and kind of be a part of it if you understand kind of what's happening. Like, I think reality becomes very plastic this month. Very plastic. Very fluid. There's you know, there's some fixed energy, but the more that we kind of move into the month, right? Well, let's see, where's Uranus? It's at 10. So right now we've got, you know, this kind of crazy fixed energy right here, right? And then we have sort of the fixed dynamic going on here, but then Jupiter moves out of that fixed energy and goes mutable. It's going to be a really interesting time. Really, really, really interesting time. So I feel like propaganda is through the roof. Propaganda is through, and it's like, what are we going to be able to know and discern? Remember when everything happened with China and there was like, you know, there were people dropping like flies and all this bullshit. It's just, I feel like we're coming into another phase here. And I know that we've seen the stuff with India, but where this is going, I mean, India looks like it could be a movie set compared. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll see it as another movie set, but a bigger movie set. And when is the alien disclosure stuff going to come in? Like, when is that going to kick in? Because you know they're getting that shit ready. They are getting it ready. And I could easily see it happening with all this mutability, where reality just becomes really, really hard to track. And that's where we're headed. We're headed through a period here where, you know, there are going to be any number of plot lines and narratives taking place simultaneously. And then in June, we've got, well, in May, we've got Saturn going retrograde. I think that's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be, because now we have Jupiter going into Pisces, and we're moving into this kind of, you know, Jupiter in Pisces is almost religious. It's got a religious vibe. And you know, COVID has become a religion. It has become a new religion. It has become a fucking cult. I'm just wondering now if we're going to move into this phase and cycle, which is going to be very similar to like witch hunts and I wouldn't say burning people at the stake, but we're getting into this weird territory between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. We're beyond mask and not mask now. That shit's history, right? So we're getting into this other territory, and the thing with the vaccination is that it really is an initiation. It's an initiation, and the non-vaccinated had not been initiated. They've not been initiated. And the vaccinated people might get very upset about that. And especially if some of the real drugs are kicking in around this thing. And who knows, you know, what's going to go on with the mRNA. Right, we're just seeing the initial like effects on the body, whatever those effects are, whether they're, you know, herpes outbreak, organ shutdown, paralysis, Bell's palsy, seizures. Now we're getting into the sort of the shedding phase of this thing, which, by the way, is all mutable, right? It's where you know, where is the barrier between one person and another person? Where is it? Is it 6 feet now? Is it 6 feet because you don't want to stand within proximity of somebody who's just become a vaccine factory, a plague factory, a walking, talking plague factory? Here we are, mutability, right? Mutability. And in most cases, you know, I'm okay. I'm open with Jupiter and Pisces. Like, you know, it's what is it? It's in its like my screen sharing is paused. Let me get out of screen share for a moment. Let's see. Yeah, let's see. We have, let's see. Give me 1 second. I don't think this is the case. Here we go. Yeah. So Jupiter used to be the home planet of Pisces. We know that, right? So it's called in domicile. And let me show you. We'll just go through this here a little bit. I'll give you kind of a quick rundown of domicile, exaltation, detriment, all those things. So Sun is in domicile in Leo, Moon in domicile in Cancer, Mercury domicile in Gemini, Virgo, Venus in domicile means it's home, right? It's home. Dignity is another word for domicile. Domal dignity. Mars domicile Scorpio Aries, Jupiter domicile Sagittarius Pisces, Saturn domicile Capricorn Aquarius. Saturn used to be the home of Aquarius. Formerly the home of Aquarius, Saturn is now sole occupant of Capricorn. Capricorn is the sole occupant of Saturn. Uranus in domicile with Aquarius, Neptune in domicile with Pisces, you know this stuff. And here are the detriments. So it's the opposites, right? And then here's exaltation, and then here are the falls. So something's in a fall when it's in the opposition of exaltation, right? Yes, that's what we know. That's what we know. So Uranus is in its fall in Taurus right now. We're seeing that. Uranus is in its fall in Taurus. Mars is in its fall in Cancer, and we have that right now as well. And did you know that Pluto was in its fall in Leo? So all you baby boomers, you got that Pluto in its fall in Leo. How about that? Detriment. Yes, I have Uranus in Leo. So it's detriment. I also, let's see, is that it? Yeah, that's it. That's all I got. So anyway, Jupiter's in domicile with Pisces. It can be really good. It can be really good, but I think where we're headed with all this, all these squares going on, and all the, you know, the squares with Neptune, I think it's going to be very hard to distinguish, you know, what's real from not real, and lines are going to get really, really blurry. Really, really blurry lines. And I don't think that this is necessarily going to be a good thing in terms of like the pressure cooker of the Civil War and the race riots that they're trying to gin up. Like I'm starting to see more and more things that are these strange kind of pushback moments. Like there's something going on where, you know, I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I was watching this one video, and it was in Louisville. You know, they've really focused on Louisville, Kentucky, well, right along the 33rd parallel, and it was a restaurant where, you know, BLM is protesting, and it was these people were sitting down, they're outside the restaurant, they're just trying to have some food. And they come in and they start harassing them, and they kind of moved in to where they were sitting down. And the waitress there, who happened to be so-called Black African American, she was telling them to get out, to leave. And she was vocal. And she was pushing these people. And then a guy who was a patron, a diner, gets up and pulls, I think it might have been a 2-shot Derringer. I don't know what he's going to do with that. He pulls it out, and he, you know, he brandishes a firearm. So things are getting very chippy, super chippy. And then I saw this moron decide he was going to go to I don't know. The Lord works in mysterious ways. This guy decides that he's going to go to a concealed carry class, and he goes inside the class during a break, and he finds a bag where everybody brings their gun to a concealed carry class. He finds a bag that's sitting down on the floor, and the guy who's sitting at the table got up, and who knows, went to get a cup of coffee, use a head, whatever. He's not there. This dude goes there, and he starts rummaging around his bag to find his fucking gun. And they catch him. And then they kick him out. Then they call the cops. The cops show up. The guy takes out a screwdriver and starts to whack one of the cops in the neck with a screwdriver. And he's trying to get away, and you got 4 guys running out of the concealed carry class, and then you've got a cop, and all 4 of them just unloaded on this dude. And he's just done, gone, right? So there's weird stuff happening now. weird things. Like you're starting to see like people have had enough. They've had enough. And when we get into this period now with all this mutability at the end of the month, I think it's going to get really tricky. Really, really tricky. And I think a lot of lines are going to be smudged and blurred, and it's going to be very hard to discern. You think it's been hard to discern what's real now? Up until now, just wait. Just wait. May is going to be, and then we've got on the 26th, we've got like a blood moon on the 26th, which I'm not going to get into tonight, but that's another factor for May. I think May is significant, really significant. And the one thing about mutability that I find to be interesting is that because in a lot of ways, when you get into things like Gemini and Pisces, particularly, to some degree, Sagittarius too, you're really in the propaganda window. You know, Sagittarius, you can get religious propaganda, religious programming. Pisces, you get different kinds of program. You get Hollywood programming with Pisces. You know, Hollywood's like big time programming. You know, film, illusion, actors, roles, what's real, what's not real. Again, programming. Gemini, you get programming and propaganda, the press with Gemini. So when you get a lot of mutability happening, and especially when you get it like firing around those squares, and you know we're going to have a moon in Sagittarius in this mix too. When all that stuff happens, then things become pretty loose. Pretty loose. And it doesn't always have to be bad. You know, it doesn't always have to be bad. We see these squares, and we you know, we see these you know, sort of celestial characterizations. You know, with Gemini and duality, and you know, things like, you know, spies and multiple identities and multiple personas and split personalities and all those things that we know about with Gemini. We get into Pisces, and we get a different kind of duality, right? We get heaven and we get hell, we get everything in between, and we just look at it and go, oh my God, it's going to be bad. It doesn't always have to be bad. And the reason why is because I think the Mercury retrograde is going to be really interesting, because a lot of the stuff that's been fed to us, because everything that we've been, this program that we're in now, and it's a program, the program that we're in really started right around the 26th of May, which is where this moon is going to be. It's where this blood moon is going to be. The 26th of May is when George Floyd happened last year. It was May 26th. And they've built up an entire narrative over the course of the following year with that, and hand in glove with COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. When one was sort of waning, the other would rise, and vice versa. And we're moving into the spring, right? This is, you know, this is the American spring. This is where they want to move the purple revolution to the fore. You know, they want to go in now. Remember, these are spring revolutions, springtime revolutions, you know, where the conditions of, you know, the weather begin to change, right? People can come out more. They're not cold and snowbound. You can't necessarily throw a revolution when it's freezing unless you take the power offline, in which case you might be able to do that. But the difference is that we're going to be in this Mercury retrograde, and then we're going to be in Saturn retrograde too. And I think these retrogrades are going to be interesting because they have the potential of undoing a lot of the bullshit that we've had to go through, and a lot of the lies and a lot of the illusions that people have been indoctrinated by. And my sense is that they're going to be running to catch up, to keep these narratives moving in the direction that they want them to continue to move in, so that they can keep people scared, distracted, separated, divided, And I don't think it's going to work. And normally when we get into retrograde periods, like they can signal a time where, there have been certain qualities and gains and things that have happened. Well, during a retrograde cycle, you might, revisit, what those things have been, how they came into existence, if they're truly valid and quote unquote real, those gains, may need some minor tweaking or whatever, but you get to move forward once you've tweaked those things. But if you've been in a time like we've been in a time where everything seems to have been retrograde, like taking us out of the 21st century and moving us back into kind of a pre-reset period, or beginning to reanimate this idea of a reset, and everything's been put into place along those lines. Well, retrograde can be really interesting because the forward movement of those things gets slowed down. And in fact, it can be reversed. So that's one way of looking at it. The one thing I am concerned about with the Mercury retrograde has to do with travel and restricting travel. I'm a little concerned about that. And I'm not concerned about international travel, whatever. I'm concerned about interstate travel, intrastate travel. That stuff concerns me. I'm also a bit concerned about some of the things that go along with, with Pisces squares. You're dealing with petroleum, you're dealing with fuel. And we know that whether it's Klaus Schwab or, who's ever in the White House or, whatever the bloodline families are, they want to break down, freedom and liberty of movement. That includes cars and that includes petroleum, and they want to break it down. So would it be, and by the way, if you're not paying attention, a lot of these refineries have been going through these explosions. Like they had a huge one in this, was it Thailand or Indonesia? A huge explosion. Like I can see some of that stuff happening during the Mercury retrograde too. And now all of a sudden you've got gas prices, hitting $4.50, $5 a gallon. In some places, California wouldn't be uncommon. And then we're going to run, the inflation thing, that's happening. That is happening. Have you priced lumber and houses lately? You throw on a petroleum crisis on top of that, through the roof. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't adapt. A lot of mutability in the air, and and we're in a period where again we're having this kind of self-organizing principle in a lot of ways. But remember now, Jupiter's moving into Pisces, so it's going to be a little bit different than Jupiter in Aquarius, and Saturn's moving retrograde. It's going to be an interesting month, really interesting month. And so there are some people who think that we're going to go through a financial crash this month as well. So, if you're a crypto head, you're playing the crypto world, who knows? Maybe you want to hedge. The crypto world, I think, is interesting. I'm not completely, I don't think it's a complete psyop, but I do know that they want to launch a digital currency, and they're getting people trained with cryptos and digital currency. It's part of the game. Do I think that there'll be some outlaw currencies? Probably. But how are you going to manage the exchanges? And I mean, there's a lot of different questions around that. So I'm not here to, rule out cryptos at all, but I do know that they're going to make it as difficult as possible to be able to cash them out or use them. I mean, if I was the SEC, I'd start looking at everybody's bank account, and anything over $9,000. And if they're able to track a transaction from Coinbase or something like that, ding, 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 ding. That's what they'll do. That's what they'll do. But I do think that there's some leeway, some latitude, and so I'm not poo-pooing the crypto world at all. I just you just gotta be smart. You have to be smart. And I know a lot of people have made very good money on the crypto world. But what are you going to do with it? I know millionaires. I know crypto millionaires. But if you all of a sudden went from Coinbase and just decided you were going to dump $1 million into your bank account, well, number one, you'd raise a lot of attention. And number two, if you said to your bank, hey, I want to cash that out, can you send me, I'm going to come down on Friday, and I'm going to get $1 million in cash. I think the bank's going to give you $1 million in cash. Probably a pretty good chance that the bank has no more than maybe $20,000 in cash on hand at any time. Most banks would be hard pressed to give you more than $20,000. Am I right? Am I right about that? So there's your dilemma with cryptos. Now you could move it into Bitcoin, and I'm sure you could purchase things with Bitcoin. There's a guy on Craigslist who's selling a car, take Bitcoin. So if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to buy somebody's land with Bitcoin, I mean, there you go. There's your exchange. There's your exchange. It can happen. But then you've got to figure out, how you do a contract and everything with that, so that's legally standing, right? So if you do send somebody, what you want in Bitcoin, what they want in Bitcoin, what are you going to do in terms of, I mean, you literally have to be there in order to do that, make that transaction. You'd have to have paperwork and everything signed, right? So, there are still challenges in crypto world, and I think there are still opportunities. That said, again, I think May is going to be an interesting month where everything is loosey-goosey and more sort of fluid and plastic. And that's the way, but again, it doesn't have to be all bad. I'm not here to be the bearer of bad news. I mean, there's some interesting things. Think of May as like a slipstream, and think of, this kind of idea of consensus reality sort of, being more in a place of flux, and, sit back and watch where errors are made, or watch where people, especially during Mercury retrograde. In a Mercury retrograde, people will say shit and will incriminate themselves, either on a personal level or on a mundane sort of collective and global level. Be like, whoa, where'd that happen? I always find Mercury retrogrades to be really interesting. Really, really. And where you see a lot of Mercury retrograde actions in the world of sports. So what do we have? We're coming up on the NBA playoffs, a little Major League Baseball, and I'm not sure when the California election is going to take place, but that'll definitely be interesting, especially since you have Caitlyn Jenner. What would happen if Caitlyn Jenner became governor of California? That'd just be so weird. So weird. Just bizarre. Anyway, let's go back to the chart of the moment. And then we're going to get into this idea of the fourth quadrant. Okay. There we go. So we'll get back here. Okay, so tomorrow, theoretically, you go to work. We've got the moon in Aquarius. By the end of the day, it's going to be in a closer orb with Saturn. So you're going to have a moon-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. Those are chilly vibes. Those are definitely chilly vibes. Square the sun in Taurus. Not a lot of sentimentality on Monday. And then we're still in that Saturn-Uranus square, Uranus moving retrograde, Saturn moving retrograde shortly. Then we're going to have Moon coming in on that conjunction, square Uranus. Boy, those are really difficult energies for a Monday. Those are really difficult. It's kind of like the energies of I've had enough. But it's not like a fiery, moon in Aries or moon in Sagittarius, where there's righteousness, righteous indignation, or a moon in Aries, which is just like, the will to act emotionally. But it has its own energy here, and it's like, fuck it, I've had enough. So Monday, Tuesday, that's energy where you can walk away from things and be completely dispassionate. No attachment. No attachment. So if you've been wanting to make a change, a significant change, the change that will be fixed and in place, Monday, Tuesday are your days. They're your days. And it's also kind of an interesting energy to not take things personally. I couldn't think of a more detached moon than a moon in Aquarius conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, and then squaring off against Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius, conjuncting the sun in Taurus, where you've got like kind of this Aquarian energy. It's going to be really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. I don't know. It's got, it's got that kind of Howard Beale energy. You're mad as hell. You're not going to take it anymore, but you're not mad as hell. It's kind of like, I'm just done. I'm done. I'm done. Moving on. So if you wanted to make some major changes in your life emotionally, Monday, Tuesday, circle them on your calendar. You'll be able to have some very cool, surgical, emotional moments. And you might be at the receiving end of one of those cool, surgical, emotional moments. You know what? You could probably have enough detachment and be able to let go. Be able to let go. It doesn't mean that there isn't any real emotion. Yeah, there's emotion. We got Neptune in Pisces. Venus is in Taurus. That's a really, really nice aspect. Really nice aspect. It's compassionate. It's peaceful. This is where you want to move the energy, right? Right here. And there's a lot of real intuitive and kind of, psychic energy, in the air for, tonight, tomorrow, Tuesday. Very, very kind of instinctual. Taurus is an earth sign. And moving on your instincts. Yeah, this is good. And it's a real contrast to sort of the hard squares that are going on here. Right, hard squares. Super hard squares. And we're in third quarter moon. So this is it. This is the third quarter moon. And the moon is getting ready to move into its balsamic phase. So this is an adjustment cycle with the moon, lunar adjustment cycle. You can make changes. I think third quarter moon, it's gone through that full phase, whatever happened, during Scorpio, whatever you went through with that full moon in Scorpio. Now you get to this point where, you've gone through a quarter of a phase, of that moon or of that lunar cycle. And in Aquarius, you can be much more detached and surgical about whatever kind of intensity that you have with that Scorpio move, whatever brought up. You can make the changes now. More easily. Theoretically, that's how this would work. So eventually now we get into that balsamic phase, which is really going to start when the moon moves into Pisces later this week. That's going to be another interesting lunar cycle, with the moon in conjunction with Neptune. So let's see, what is that? Okay, so we've got the moon in Pisces, so we're talking Thursday and Friday. Here we go, the 6th. That's right, we looked at this. And that conjunction is going to be happening on the 6th. And we're definitely moving into balsamic territory. That the final degrees of Pisces clearly in Aries, that moon is balsamic. So the moon is just evaporating. There's less and less and less, especially in Pisces. You know, I just wonder how much longer Biden actually has. I wonder how much longer he has. I'm not convinced it's long. In fact, I'm really surprised. I'm very surprised that Kamala Harris is not president yet. And we still have to go with, well, we have a couple degrees left of Jupiter Aquarius at 28, 29, 29. Her Saturn in her chart is at 28 Aquarius conjunct her midheaven. So I really thought that when Jupiter would get up to her natal Saturn, that would be a defining moment for Harris, and that she might, you know, take the reins at that point. I think it's close. I really think it's close. Now, when Jupiter does move into Pisces, it's going to conjunct her midheaven. 1 degree, 2 degrees, it's going to be right there. So keep your eye on Kamala Harris this week. Keep your eye on Biden this week. He's, yeah. And I think the South Node, where's his, well, his South Node's already in his 12th house. It's already in his, he's not going to make it through that South Node in Scorpio. He's just not going to make it. And that's a ways off. We're not going to get into that till next year. But when it does move into Scorpio, it's going to conjunct his Scorpio planets. He's got, I think, Mercury, Mars, and Venus all in Scorpio. South Node, 12th house. Yeah. That ain't happening. That ain't happening. So keep your eye on Biden and keep your eye, especially on Harris this week. Look for a prelude to Harris as president this week. I think that's where we'll see it. We'll see Jupiter hitting her midheaven. And I think we'll get some sense as to where that's going. Because Biden's not long. Right after he did the whatever that thing was, he was coughing a lot. Like how Hillary Clinton was coughing. Remember that? A lot. Okay, so I wanted to get into this idea of the combination or the consolidation of these 3 quadrants of the chart, and how for a while I was looking at, here I'll show you, and I'll just use this chart here as a marker. We'll go back to right here. Okay, so part of what I've been looking at from a mundane perspective is that we're moving theoretically from the 10th house, which is about government and corporations, and we're moving from the 10th house to the 11th house, which has much more to do with this idea of the global community, things like networks, the greater good, all 11th house nomenclature, and that these 10th house institutions, whether it was government or corporations, would then just kind of transfer and move to the 11th house. And I thought, well, that's where we're going. And to some extent that's true. But what I'm also seeing is this consolidation. This consolidation between these 3 houses, the 10th and 11th and the 12th. And that we're having a synthesis of all 3. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so for instance, back in the day, you would have to go to a hospital, or at the very least, you would go to a doctor's office and you would receive a shot, like a vaccine. That would be very 12th house-like. Very 12th house-like. Well, you don't do that anymore. You don't have to go to a hospital to get that shot. You can go to frickin' Krispy Kreme donuts and get a shot. Apparently in a donut. No, I'm just kidding. No, you could go to CVS or HEB and you can get vaxxed up at HEB. You can do that, or CVS. So what is that? Well, the 10th house is CVS and HEB or any other of these markets. They're corporations. They're corporations. So the corporation has opened itself up to becoming a dispenser or a dispensary of a 12th house practice. The 11th house is the social driver. Whatever the social, whether it's the message or whether it's your health network or whatever they are, right? That's the 11th house. And then you're getting pressure from people to get the vaccine. Did you get the shot? Did you get the shot yet? When do you get the shot? Sounds like an episode from Seinfeld. When do you get the shot? That's really what it's become. It's become like a fucking Seinfeld episode meets the Twilight Zone. But we're seeing this consolidation between these three houses. So it just becomes one. Just becomes one. Where we have the medical, we have sort of the dispensation. And by the way, there's also this weird kind of cultic, quasi-religious thing that's coming out of, which is very 12th house. It's super 12th house. So we've got that. We've got the actual place where you go and get your jab. You have the corporations, which are making them available, and in some cases, are even incentivizing them. Like the Ford dealer here in town, paying their employees $100 to get vaccinated. Can you fucking believe that? Well, if you get a vaccine, you get $100. Big fucking deal. Big deal. And is the parent company, is Ford incentivizing them? Is Ford paying them to do that? Like, why would that guy do that? Why would somebody be invested in rewarding their employees? It doesn't make any sense to me. Unless, of course, you wanted robot salespeople or zombie salespeople. Yeah, sure. Sign them up. I can only think that Ford, the parent company, is incentivizing them. It's some sort of incentivization program. But what we're seeing here is, we talk about like the world without borders. Oh, there's no more borders now. Well, that's not true. That's not true. The United States doesn't have any borders. You can come on in here, but you try to leave the United States and go to Mexico, hey, you got a little bit of a border there. You got a border problem, buddy. Same with Canada. Hey, man, can I just come in? These people in Mexico just coming in, can I just come in? No. However, that said, the borders are being erased. And, as above, so below, in the chart, so without. So these borders are getting erased. And we're having this consolidation of this entire quadrant together. And that's pretty powerful if you think about it, because there is some sanity when you have the wheel divided. This house related to this, right? They all serve a purpose. But then when you get to an area where all of a sudden now there is very little demarcation, sort of like, wow, this fourth quadrant just opened wide up, and it's very hard to discern where we are in our journey around the chart. Now we're in this kind of weird open space where there's rules that define it and there's rules that don't define it. And I think that there's a lot of power. Like if you're able to construct a reality where all three of these houses are being synergized together, that's a lot of power. I mean, think about that. They're kind of taking a quarter of the chart and just says, this is ours. This is ours. And then when that happens, it's going to impact and affect other parts of the chart, especially when it comes to the sixth house, health. Because now you've got essentially three houses sort of all together as one house. And for the most part, like coming over here, emptying out into these three houses, primarily the sixth house, because that's what we're dealing with. It's a power grab. It's a total power grab. Look at the fourth house. Look at homes. Look at the price of homes. They go through the fucking roof. Why? Well, guess what? These three houses have decided to join forces, or at least they're joining forces together. Remember, corporations, distribution, the 11th house, network, social programming, 12th house is the house of belief and propaganda and hospitals and level 4 labs in Wuhan. And they've just created a super fucking house. So these three houses are being really impacted. Work, health, homes, price of homes. And guess what? Fifth house, children, love, procreation. Hello? Issues. So I think this is a significant development. It's a significant development. It's literally a power grab. Now, we have to redefine these on our own. We have to redefine them on our own. Now, this is where we get into all that mutability happening. By the end of the month, we can kind of see, wow, geez, what's going on here? They've just created like a super fucking house. It's all dominant. It's all one. And guess what? It has an impact on the first house, which is the individual. Right? So all this pressure, all of this accumulated kind of content and meaning kind of empties out over here too on the ascendant. It's like, whoa, the weight of all those three houses is right there on the ascendant, which is the individual. So it's kind of an interesting way of looking at where we are in terms of our times. And I think it makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Not a lot of fire right now, is there? Or what is it? Yeah. We got Chiron and Aries, and that's it, Bubba. We're not going to get any more fire until Mars goes into Leo. You got a ways. We got a ways. So you have to find some creative spark along the way. Little creative spark. Little creative spark. We'll have that moon in Aries, but it's going to be, part of that balsamic moon. There's not going to be a lot of energy in the moon in Aries. We'll have to wait till it moves into Leo, first quarter moon in Leo. You get a little more fire in the sky, but not much. Not a whole lot. Interesting. Very interesting. So I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about, the consolidation of the fourth quadrant. That's what's happening. That is what's happening. So let's look at it from the individual perspective. So if they're consolidated, if these three houses are being consolidated on a social level or on a collective level, then why can't you consolidate them in your own life? Why can't you have all three of these houses become one for you? Well, you can, especially when we're talking about, you know, the mutability that's happening at the end, you know, throughout May and really the end of the month. So look at what's in your 10th house and look what's in your 11th house and look at what's in your 12th house. They don't necessarily have to be these, you know, clearly and cleanly demarcated, you know, parts of your theoretical persona. Now all of a sudden, break down the walls. They're all acting as one, right? They're all acting as one. It's kind of exciting. And I think if you can begin to wrap your head around that, and like, well, I've got such and such in my 10th house, and I've got such and such in my 11th house. And all of a sudden, you've got those planets in the fourth quadrant. And they're all working towards some other like goal now, synthesis, right? Synthesis between this place where you're in touch with theoretically your soul, synthesis where your family and your friends are connected to your soul, synthesis between you know, your 12th house and your 10th house where your work is connected with your soul. And all, you know, and everybody therein shares the benefits of that. Think about that. When we look at astrology in new ways, we can help redefine our own experience. Because if they're opening up theoretically today, whoever they are, theoretically, if this quadrant is being opened up and synthesized, and I firmly believe it is, then you can do the same thing. You can do the same thing, and it can be really interesting. So you have to understand what's in the 11th house. You have to understand what's in the 10th house. You have to understand what's in the 12th house, at least for you and your chart, and then liberate them. Liberate them. Have it be one unified form of expression. What you do in the world, how you socialize, and the people that you interconnect with, connect with and interconnect with, and this place where you're generating your kind of soul essence or soul energy, it's all one. It's all one. And then who knows, you know, maybe you can move it into the rest of the chart. But for now, try 3 houses. See what that feels like. It could be very interesting. Okay, let me get back to y'all. Mike Cernovich used y'all in his tweet. I was like, really? You used y'all? Dude, what's that about? Okay, where are you? Vedic astrology is what you see in the sky. Tropical is calculated with the equinoxes. Vedic astrology is ancient science. Hindus, the priestly class, never do anything without running a chart. That's true. That's true. Let me say this about Vedic astrology. It's accurate sometimes, but it's also fucking fatalistic. It is accurate and it is fatalistic. That's my sense. And I'm born in the West. I'm born in the West. This is my system. My system. Mercury retrograde in my chart. Always wondered what it means. Federal crime to board a bus, taxi, or Uber since February without double falsy masks. Biden can't mandate what Uber does. I took an Uber to the airport in March. Yeah, I didn't wear a mask in an Uber in Houston. Missoula, where is that? Send me a link for the bus's mandate with double masks. I'd love to read it. Let's see, what else do we have here? When a federal marshal be required to make the mask arrest? It's called sheriffs. Most sheriffs will not enforce any mask order. Let's see. What else do we have here? Selling a home next month. You'll probably get top dollar for it. What else? I feel like that is how the parasitic class wants us to feel. They're showing us the darkness constantly, but it seems desperate. I truly believe something much bigger is happening. I totally agree. Totally agree. Oh, thanks, JP. I also think it's time for me to start eating less and getting back on track. I usually eat about 1 meal a day. Yep. I'm going to need a new place to live. Definitely. Definitely. Let's see what else. Let's see what else we have here. Done for waiting to do vaccine ads. Yeah. Don't get me started on that. A lot of QAnons in here. I wouldn't necessarily say that. No. I wouldn't say there's a lot of QAnons in here. Yeah. There's Anons, but I wouldn't say QAnons. Let's see. Jane says, you would have been an awesome their city council. I'm bummed, but this, you know what? I don't, I'm all good with that. I'm good. Vaccines and the new segregation system, absolutely. They're going to try to spell us one more time. They're losing their grip. Let's see what else we have here. Cloud World News. I keep seeing webs, like webs of deceit. There's a lot of that. There is a lot of that. Chemtrails off the hook. I haven't seen any chemtrails lately, but I don't doubt that. Yes, we're talking 9/11. No planes. I'm a no planes guy. No planes guy. Let's see what else do we have here. Fear plus wearing mask equals really low energy aura, right? Absolutely. Let's see what else. I travel for a living, have to wear a mask because I'm a flight attendant. Ooh. That's got to be rough. Maybe not for you. It'd be rough for me. Let's see. I have one put on for like 2 seconds. I feel gangster walking down my street. Yep, I want my oxygen. Absolutely. What else? It is a federal mandate from, okay. Biden's, whatever. I jumped in late. I want to check out what you were saying about 10, 11, 12 houses. I'm basically, JMP, so what we're seeing a consolidation of house 10, 11, 12, like the fourth quadrant, and putting them all together. Yeah, and you could go back and check it out, listen to it. Like a huge reveal that Trump really won. Yeah, maybe if they 12th, 11th, 10th, 11th, 12th census, the individual personal chart is super helpful. Yeah. Let's look at it from a new perspective, right? Like integration, because that's kind of what they're doing. You know, they're integrating those three houses so that they can, you know, create kind of a sector or zone of control, all coming together. Medical, hospital, you know, the realm of illusion, the realm of, you know, religion, the space of the cult, the 12th house, the 10th house being government, mandate, corporations, right? The 11th house, social networks, friends, media, just, you know, put it all together for that fourth house quadrant synthesis. That's what's happening. And that's what's happening now. And you can do the same thing theoretically if you can wrap your head around that. Okay, it's a great time to be alive. It is a great time to be alive. I'm telling you that right now. It's not an easy time to be alive. It is a great time to be alive because you are witness to history in a way that nobody else has ever been witness to history in this way, in this domain. Okay. There have been other times, other eras, other epochs, other periods, some of which we understand and know, a lot of which we don't. And they had their own version of this, and they went through it in their own way. But we have a different version of it in that we have perspective. We have an inkling, we have an idea of what's gone before us. We have an idea as to how this reality is kind of moved around and reset vis-a-vis a dark city kind of model of a, you know, for lack of a better term, a matrix, since we can all agree upon that. We have an understanding of that. We have an understanding of these things in a way that I don't believe other generations or other epochs or other eras have had. And we also have a lot of tools at our disposal. And we also are, you know, in a time where we had this super conjunction, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the winter solstice of last year, which sets the stage for this battle of heaven and hell on Earth for the next 20 years. And you're a part of it. You're a part of the dynamic. You're a part of the alchemical crucible in which all of this is taking place. And the more conscious and aware that you are of it, and the less fear you have, and the more love you have, the easier it's going to be for you to move through this time. And we're going to pick up, you know, new skills and new gifts and new traits along the way if you're open to it. If you're open to it. So don't despair. Don't despair. And you're together. Like we're together. We're together. We are together. And that's an important thing to understand. And even for me, like through this process with, you know, the so-called election and, you know, people, you know, claiming that I was a Satanist or, you know, that I had a cult, and they don't know anything about me, but because of their limited scope and perspective and their background and their upbringing and their indoctrination, that they're going to like spell it out that way. And even in that circumstance, there was an interesting kind of frisson and respect in some ways. And if that can happen under what I would call kind of more orthodox or ecumenical circumstances, and in some instances even judgmental, think of what can really happen. Because, you know, a few bricks were kind of broken down with a couple of walls, and we're a little bit closer, I think, as a result of that, at least in my estimation. Okay, you got the roadmap. Go back and listen to the rest of tonight's show. I'm still doing readings, by the way. I'm kind of behind on the reading front, so if you've got a reading, I promise I'm going to get to you. But I am still doing readings. And now that I'm no longer going to be in the mix for running for city council or even being part of city council, when we get together next week on Sunday night, I'll be announcing some classes, some webinars, and I'll be working on putting those together this week. So we'll be able to do some other stuff, and we'll take it from there. Thanks for being here. As always, much love to you, Chatlandia. You guys are awesome. Let me get back to you so I can say goodnight. Whoops. Okay, we'll see you guys tomorrow here on 15 Minutes of Flame. And love you all. Use your head in order to discern what's real, your heart to step in what's possible. From Jasper and Rosie and myself, have yourself a good Sunday night. Have a great week, and I'll see you tomorrow.